Hello, all. Okay, I'm going to ask my questions, and you feel free to answer as much of it as you'd like and in any way that you like. So, were you part of a congregation growing up, or, well, first let me say, you were religious before, as your viewers well know, because
yes.
if they come to your channel, they kind of have your background. So, but just to put that out there for any new viewer, you were religious before.
I was, yes.
And as part of that, were you part of a congregation, or were you taught about your religion and the Bible at home, or was it kind of a combination of both?
It was mostly at home. There was a congregation. It was a group of us, a group of families that would meet together once or twice a month on average. And it was Messianic Jewish. It's I have no idea if there was a single person of Jewish descent in that group. The Messianic Jewish movement, or at least the part of it that I was involved in, was kind of a radical offshoot of the evangelical movement, where they went back to a lot of the fun stuff in the Old Testament and were like, what do you mean this was just for the Jews? It's for us too, isn't it? So no eating pork, no eating shellfish, all the old dietary laws that people tend to make fun of Christians for, why do you do that? We tried our best to live up to those laws. And it was, the congregation was kind of wild. There was a lot of cosplaying where Caucasians would show up dressed up in Jewish attire with the head coverings and whatnot, and some of them would bring ram's horn shofars and blow them, and it was it was it was wild. It didn't seem so funny at the time, but now now it kind of does. It was basically, I don't know, I want to call it a cult, but at the same time I feel like it was too disorganized to be a cult, because it was constant bickering, and it was a collection of people who had the fact that we took the Old Testament very, very seriously in common, but how we interpreted things, how we interpreted doctrine, where we drew the line on what you had to believe or do to be saved, we all drew different lines in different places. So there was a lot of infighting and bickering, and it was just an incredibly toxic place, and it's a wonder anybody ever came out of that congregation with any amount of faith at all. Yeah, that's about all I have to say about that.
Do you mind if I follow up a little
Yeah, sure,
bit?
go ahead.
Because it seems like there has to be a little bit, or some aspect of seclusion in order to do that. Is that?
Yes, we were homeschooled. Yeah, we were
That's
very...
a good way to do it.
Yeah, I mean, my social interaction was basically my brother, and once or twice a month with the other families. That was my social life.
Yeah, that is a good way to keep people reined in, I think.
Yes.
A very effective tactic.
Yeah, well, actually there were a couple, there were a couple of things I wanted to elaborate on the congregation that I forgot about. I made notes about them here. Yeah, there were, like I said, there was a lot of division and a lot of infighting. There were a handful of people in the group who believed that if you believed that only Jews, only people of the Jewish bloodline could be saved, and that if you believed in God, well, obviously that meant that you were a lost Jew, that you were of the bloodline and got scattered among the people. And there was like this Voldemort-like obsession with purifying the bloodlines and only breeding with people who were confirmed to be Jewish either by blood or by the simple fact that they were believers. There was one guy who gave a talk at the congregation one time about how if you were a girl who was a believer and ever dared to have sex with either a non-believer or someone who was not of Jewish descent, he argued that your DNA would be permanently changed, and that no Jewish man could ever make a baby with you and have it be 100% his baby. It would always be corrupted by the non-pure bloodline, which was nuts. And even back then, as sheltered and indoctrinated as I was, I knew it was nuts. This is not something my parents taught me. We weren't in that camp. Like I said, there was a lot of division, and I knew enough to know that was crazy. There was the Sacred Name movement. I'm not sure if you ever heard of that. That was Messianic Jewish, radical offshoot of evangelicalism. Sacred Namers, radical offshoot of Messianic Jewish, to even further down the rabbit hole. They believed that you had to pray to the Jewish God specifically, who had a name. You can't just pray dear God, because how do you know you're not praying to Allah or some other God? You have to pray to Yahweh or Yahweh. Like, we had people who read a particular book, and, it says in this book that, this is how they pronounced it in the Old Hebrew, and, like, nobody really knows how the Old Hebrew was pronounced. There's a reason why we just say God and Lord, because nobody is really sure what the vowels were back then. But, we had people who had read some commentary that insisted it was this way, or we had one guy who said that it was revealed to him in a dream how it was pronounced, and that none of us were going to heaven unless we listened to them and started saying the name right. So there was that form of insanity and bickering. There's certain things in the Bible, such as the fact that, like the book of Mark, the oldest versions of the text is missing the part where Jesus encourages his followers to drink poison and handle snakes and all that stuff. So there were some who accepted that, okay, the original version didn't have that, it must have been a scribal edition. Then there were others who got really worked up at that suggestion because, well, no, that would mean that the King James Bible that we've been using for so many generations, that was wrong. God wouldn't let that happen. So here's what actually happened. The original text had that passage in it, then it got corrupted, and all these original copies got destroyed, and then somehow, and then somebody copied the original text over again, and we have there are older copies that we just haven't found yet. And it was just a whole lot of, is a hot dog a sandwich level bickering, and a lot of people making assertions that had absolutely no basis, just faith-based, I believe this, and so you are all awful people for not believing this as well, with absolutely nothing to back it up. No physical copy of the book of Mark, no reliable way to figure out how the name was pronounced. Just it was a madhouse.
So when and how did you learn about other religions?
I was always aware that other religions existed. My main thought on them back at the time was they're kind of evidence for my religion, in the sense that, see, everybody all across the world knows about the one true God. It's just over time the story has been corrupted. And then there were some religions, like, we really didn't like Islam in particular, but, I don't know, maybe it's jealousy because technically it's all based on the same Abrahamic faith. I don't know why Islam in particular, but some religions are just, doctrines of demons, like actual fallen angels posed as gods and revealed scripture. I don't know, we had weird ideas about other religions. So yes, they existed. And in a way, I kind of took that as evidence that, see, there is a God and there is a supernatural. Everybody knows it, and it kind of reaffirmed my faith. But I'd never really cared to look into or research other religions in my early life because, why would I care how people messed up my religion and got it wrong? And I don't know. I guess your question was specifically, when did I learn about them? I mean, I always knew that they were around, but when did I start learning details? Not for a long time, I guess. I mean, I got to know Wiccan at some point, and pagan, and I'm not even... There was one lady who I worked with who identified as a witch, but I don't really know what that meant to her. I don't know. By and by, I started learning more about other people who were in other religions, and, learning a little more about what they were about, but it wasn't, I guess, until fairly recently that I started really taking any actual interest in it.
Yeah, fair enough. In my experience was kind of similar, I guess, where I knew of the religions, I didn't know about them.
Right.
But they were all going to hell, so.
Right.
But my next, I guess, related question to that was, what did you think about the people who practiced did you have that perception about the people who practiced other faiths, or?
Well, they were all going to hell.
Yeah, we just established, sure.
Yeah, I guess my basic understanding of it back then was you have to have faith in Jesus to make it into heaven, and you should follow all of the Old Testament laws to the best of your ability, because there will be consequences in this life if you don't, and possibly even in the next life you might have a more exalted station, I guess, which I don't even know what that would look like, to tell the truth. I don't know. If you get a bigger mansion, I guess. I don't know. Catholics, it's like, technically they meet the criteria, but, they rely so much on works and rituals, so does the fact that they rely on rituals cancel out the fact that they rely on Christ? Do they fully rely on Christ? Not really, but they do to an extent, so, I don't know. They were... I had no idea whether I was going to see them in the next life or not.
Well, you weren't in charge of that. You don't have to worry about
Yes.
it.
That's the thing about being isolated, is that if you were exposed to these people, you might learn that they're actually nice people and actually care about them. It's so much easier when they're just abstract characters in a prejudiced story told to make you dislike them. So, one of the advantages of homeschooling.
Yeah. Or they're devils and they're going to lure you away.
Yes, yeah.
Oh, which brings me to my next question. What did you think about atheists?
I thought they were scary people. Yeah, I was raised with the idea that the end times were coming and there was going to be the Great Tribulation. We did not believe in the pre-tribulation rapture. We believed that there was going to be a time of great trouble on the earth, and that the atheists, as well as everyone from every other religion who was not Christian, in hindsight, it seems kind of far-fetched, but somehow all the atheists, all the various religions, they were all somehow going to find common ground and come after us. And so everybody who was an atheist, I felt, if they weren't ready to kill us yet, they would be when the orders came down. So no, I did not like them. I did not. I thought they were terrifying people, which, again, I didn't really know any. I just knew of them and what supposedly they were going to do to us someday.
But so you didn't, as far as I guess most things go, you kind of put atheists on equal footing with people of other religions.
For the most part. I think doctrinally, yes. I think to some extent I did. Like, there was a hopeful part of me, I suppose, that wondered, maybe if they tried to serve God and got it a little bit wrong, maybe God will say good enough and you can come upstairs with the good children, but I felt bad for the fact that some people were just, following the wrong religion and devoting their lives to it. Like, in the doctrine I was raised in, there was no hope for them, but I guess a part of me felt sorry for them and hoped maybe, but the atheists, like, no, they rejected God, they're no hope for them.
Yeah, see, I thought that atheists were, like, even a little step further from other people of other religions, because they, or, just a little bit, they were like, either the devil was working through them, or had seduced or enticed them somehow. There was something extra bad about atheists.
Yeah.
And then they wanted you. They wanted you out of religion.
Yeah.
Do you ever think you'd be one?
No. No. It took a while to even admit that I was one. Even when technically I guess I was one, in the sense that, I didn't really believe anymore. I wasn't 100% convinced that the religion I was raised in wasn't true, but I couldn't honestly say that I believed it. But I would still, I don't know, it could be true, so I still have that hope, and so that still makes me a believer, right? Because if you don't fully discount it, that means you believe, right? And so I've still hung on to that identity for a long time. It wasn't until I started having, which I won't really get into the whole story, but I had some health problems and was thinking about, I wasn't in mortal danger, but, just overthinking and thinking about mortality. And I remember the moment when it really hit me that, I don't actually believe this. So, goodness gracious, I'm either going to stop existing or be damned, one or the other. And that was kind of a tipping point for me, where I started really trying to figure out, is there any faith that I can salvage from this, or is it all bullshit? I kind of that realization started making me dig deeper. But that was the first time I kind of had to look at myself and say, I guess I'm an atheist, aren't I? Wow.
That's scary. It's a scary transition. It's not a huge change,
right? Yeah.
And yet it is. It is a huge change.
Yeah. And I felt like I had been slowly becoming that for a long time. It's just, there was a sudden moment when I realized that I had wound up here. I just kept walking into the water, and then suddenly realized I'm in the ocean,
I was actually, it's not a similar experience, but in a way it is. I transitioned to spiritual, but not, I'm doing quotes, spiritual but not religious 20 years before I became, quote unquote, an atheist. So,
spiritual, okay.
Yeah, because it is hard to accept that you're not religious anymore. And so there is that kind of, ability to hang on, even if you know that you're not really religious,
Yeah, I get that.
I don't know why I felt that way, that I still could, have my foot on both sides, I guess, of the line.
Right.
By maintaining that title, but...
You want to get into, like, what it was by spiritual? Was it like a particular pagan line of practice, or just the idea of there are spirits? Was that the extent of it, or was there a particular route you were exploring?
It was more that I did not have vocabulary yet and have the processes yet to describe what I was.
Okay.
So, it was my way of being polite also. if anyone should ask, should it come up, I had that to say instead of saying I'm an atheist, mainly because of the way we treated atheists when I was a Christian. I didn't want people to treat me like that. So,
Okay.
So I would rather describe myself not as an atheist, but as something else. Even though, I didn't have agnostic at that point, I guess is what I'm saying.
Okay.
But now I am an agnostic atheist.
I used to, even after I was pretty certain that God, or at least the God that I had been raised with, didn't exist, I still hung on desperately to some idea of the supernatural and believed that we went somewhere after we died. And I don't know, I don't want to say my own religion that I invented. To call it a religion is too much, because it was just more a line of thought that I entertained and was hopeful about, that, maybe there's some kind of consciousness to the universe that is embodied in us, and we go back to it when we die. And I came up with this metaphor where maybe it's like bits of metal that get forged and put in a body and then get thrown back into a melting pot. And that's why you see ghosts for a while, and then sometimes they go back but then get put back in, and they're not fully melted, which is why you get reincarnation. But not every soul comes back, so maybe it melts down and becomes part of the universe again. And I came up with this crazy thing, and then started trying to reaffirm that to myself by watching ghost hunter shows, which killed that very quickly because they were so bad. I went in hoping, people have been documenting ghosts for a long time. We know that the soul is real, and no, there's nothing there. They have random word generators that they go in, and it'll say blue, and then they'll go and look for something blue, and like, wow, look, there's a blue cup in the next room, so that means there's a ghost. And it's just the shows made by ghost hunters to promote that kind of belief are what killed that last hope of life after death, but even out of a religious context.
So bad ghost shows got you.
Yeah.
Nice. I was picturing the Terminator 2 when you were describing. Did you not? Was that not?
No. I was not.
That's totally what it looked like.
Yeah, I get that.
And I got this after I rewatched your videos, so I found a part where you were talking about the young earth creationism and how you were a believer of that. Now, how did you learn that how did you learn that the earth is much older than 6,000?
Well, when I was being raised, I was steeped in Answers in Genesis, Kent Hovind style apologetics, and so my understanding of it was that we had the scientists at Answers in Genesis who understood the data supporting a young earth, and then we had the other scientists who were either quite bad at their jobs or deliberately deceptive. Like, there was a part of it that was kind of at least entertaining the conspiracy theory that they wanted us to disbelieve in God so that we would have to believe in the government's authority instead. And so all the scientists who say the earth is old, they're either lying to themselves or just not very competent. The Answers in Genesis ones, they're the real scientists. And that was my understanding of it. Then, I always knew that there were people who said the earth was old, but I thought they were, either liars or incompetent. And then I was probably in my early 20s when I first began to have concerns. The starlight problem, I remember, particularly bothered me, because there are stars so far away that if the earth was 6,000 years old, the light wouldn't have hit us yet. But maybe God just sped up light once, just creation day, just brought the light over to
God
earth.
can do anything.
Yeah, God can do anything. But then you consider that sometimes stars die. Stars billions of light years away are dying. To us, it looks like they're dying recently, which means that they would have died, before creation? So, God stretched the light from a point where there never even was a star? And I don't know, it just seemed... that was one of the first things that trying to wrap my head around it. It was like, that actually looks like an old universe. And that's evidentially, that is an old universe, isn't it? And that one in particular got me to thinking, it's not all bullshit where the scientists are just making stuff up. Like, they do have reasons, don't they? And eventually, I never really studied it in depth back then, but between my difficulties trying to reconcile the barbaric buffoonery of Yahweh in the Old Testament with the all-powerful, all-knowing, and loving God supposedly of the New Testament, and how those were so incompatible, I eventually started to realize, hey, you know what? The New Testament makes a lot more sense if you just drop the Old Testament altogether, and if you just say that's mythology. And so that's how I started to become more of an old earth, more mainstream Christian for a little while, until I started rereading the New Testament through that lens and started realizing, Jesus actually believed that Jonah lived in the belly of a whale for 3 days. The whole doctrine of salvation depends upon Adam and Eve and eating the damn fruit. And it's like, so you can't do that. So I started to rather bitterly move back toward the young earth thing, and kind of like, okay, well, so God just made everything really confusing then, didn't he? So, and eventually I just kind of slowly stopped caring about all of it, and like I said, I walked out into the water until I found myself in the ocean one day, and like I don't really know how old the earth is, or I know the Bible. You can't really take the New Testament seriously without the Old Testament, or at least it seemed to me. But like, do I take any of it seriously anymore? Not really. So that's kind of when I started really digging and trying to educate myself on it and figure out who's actually right here, because it kind of matters. I'm getting old enough that it matters, and I want to know where I'm going, if anywhere.
Well, it's especially important if we did have a soul, if we want to be right.
Yes, sure. Yeah, it's either the single most important issue you will ever talk about, or the goofiest most insane thing ever. It's either one or the other, isn't it?
So how did you learn to edit and animate videos?
Okay, well, yeah, first of all, you are too kind to call it animated, because they don't move much, do they?
It's enough to call them animated.
Okay. Yeah, that 1 frame every 10-second animation speed, great frame rate. But yeah, years and years ago, just for fun, back in the days of a Windows Movie Maker, I would sometimes put videos together, and eventually I discovered that you could record a video, and instead of dropping it into the video section of Windows Movie Maker, you could drop it into the audio section, which left you free to draw whatever you wanted and just stick it up as a slideshow. And so so I kind of stumbled upon that, like, ooh, this is fun. So the recording equipment perished, so I'm not quite sure where I was. But yes, where was I? I was talking about...
Yeah, it was actually a good place for it to die.
Yeah, was I done? We're talking something about animated videos.
You talked about how to do it.
Yes, yeah, and I think I was trying to end with the joke that I've made some terrible videos that you will never get to see, and that was supposed to be funny in context. Now the moment is gone. It's not funny anymore.
Oh, that's just unfortunate. Depriving the world of your work, that's sad. But hopefully we'll have more. I'm just throwing it out there.
We're making one now.
Oh.